Hi, good afternoon, everyone. This is Heather. I'm a social worker from the Alzheimer's Foundation of America. We're going to wait a couple more moments to start as it's 12:55, but for all of you that are currently on the line, I'm going to go over a little housekeeping. Today's presentation is going to be in listen-only mode. So what that means, on the right-hand side, you'll see a control panel. And at the end of the presentation, we will be taking questions, comments, and concerns. And there's a space on the right-hand side to type those in, and I'll be reading them to the presenter. In addition, we have 4 handouts on the right-hand side that you could open and download to your computer. So once again, we will be starting at 1 o'clock. We will be in listen-only mode. At the end of the presentation, you could type in your questions, comments, or concerns on the right-hand side, along with getting the handouts from today's presentation. Thank you, everybody. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Care Connection, the free live webinar, the second Thursday of each month, and also we do have special edition webinars. Today, we do have a very special guest speaker. Her name is Dr. Ebony Green, and she's a registered nurse and family caregiver. Before I go into that, I want to let everyone know that today we will be in listen-only mode. And on the right-hand side, you will see the control panel. At the end of today's presentation, when Dr. Green is done with her presentation, you will be able to type in your questions, comments, or concerns on the right-hand side, and I will read them out loud. In addition, we have handouts on the right-hand side that you could download for your reference as needed. So before I begin, today's topic is spiritual wellness and spirituality and cooperative caregiving. Again, Dr. Green is a registered nurse and family caregiver. She holds a PhD in human services with a specialization in healthcare administration. Dr. Green is the co-founder of Caregiver Support Services, a nonprofit organization that focuses on training and supporting frontline caregivers. Dr. Green is also a published author and has written 3 books focusing on family caregiving: At the Heart of the Matter, Caregiving in the New Millennium, and Reflections from the Soul. So, Dr. Green, kindly introduce yourself, and we will now be starting today's presentation.
Thank you very much, Heather. I am ecstatic, very excited about being here and presenting today. As Heather mentioned, I will be talking about spiritual wellness and spiritually cooperative relationships. And as we talk about spiritually cooperative relationships, it really relates to your relationships as a caregiver. So I'll really get into that here in just a moment. Heather so nicely shared my bio. I do want to say that Caregiver Support Services is a member organization of AFA, and we really benefit greatly from the resources that they share with the community, with individuals who we support. In addition, from a personal perspective, my grandmother, Gran, suffered from Alzheimer's disease, and my uncle, Melvin, was her primary caregiver for 10 years until she passed away, actually, in 2010. So he was able to keep her in the home the entire caregiving time that he was providing care for her. But it was definitely a stressful time for him. And although we had a large family, sometimes it's very difficult to get individuals involved in the care that you're providing. And so when I think about spiritually cooperative relationships, I want you to kind of keep that in mind about my Uncle Melvin caring for Gran, who suffered from Alzheimer's disease, having a large family, and sometimes still feeling very alone. So I think that it's very, very important that we have the opportunity to create spiritually cooperative relationships. I'd like to begin by sharing a poem with you, and it's titled, I Am Your Caregiver. Grandmother, grandfather, mother, father, brother, sister, aunt, uncle, son, or daughter, whatever name I use to call you formally, I'm here. I have vowed to be your caregiver. I have taken responsibilities and tasks you are no longer able to perform. There is nothing too large or too small to deserve my attention. When I am with you, I feel as though I can't do anything more. When I'm away, I feel I haven't done enough. I don't take a vacation, and if I do, I can't enjoy it, not because of anything you would ever say or do, but because I want to care for you. Most of the time, I want to provide what you need myself because no one else could give you that personal touch. Sure, I might need a break, but if I took a physical break, I would still be thinking about you. I'm your doctor. I diagnose your medical conditions. I am your nurse. I take care of you physically. I am your pharmacist. I give you your medications. I am your psychiatrist. I listen to your problems. I am your accountant. I balance your checkbook and take care of your bills. I am your personal assistant. I help with making appointments. I am your maid and transportation director. I clean your home and make sure and take you where you need to go. I am all of these things to you because I care. I am formally known as your caregiver. I really think that that is an important poem from the standpoint that this is sometimes how we view ourselves as caregivers. And from one perspective, you can think about how providing care for a loved one is is a testament to your giving and caring nature. But at the same time, what can occur over time is that we can do all of the things that are listed in my I Am Your Caregiver, and a lot of us do find that we're in that mode. And then it's easy to find over time that you are experiencing distress. And so this is what we want to avoid. We want to avoid um, being everything to our loved ones, to our families, and then nothing to ourselves. It doesn't. It is not sustainable. So I want to share a spiritual model with you. It's it's the spiritually cooperative model that I've developed over time with research and um, caregiver input, and it's a conceptual model. But before I begin, um, actually, as I'm talking, I'll talk about I want to start by just talking about the spiritually cooperative section here, the third square that you will see. And I want you to kind of keep this in mind too, that the term spiritually cooperative relates to the relationships or it relates to relationships, including the relationship with your loved one or client, family, friends, the healthcare team, and also includes the relationship that you have with yourself. When you're acting in a spiritually cooperative manner, you are able to acknowledge and accept that you deserve to live a life that involves self-determination, the freedom to make choices, the opportunity for self-development, and to participate in activities that place a value on your volunteer orientation. So you may think of your caregiving for your loved one or client as a spiritual gift. I know that that's how I think of it. If you go back and look at spiritual distress, now it may sound a little harsh as I say this, but it really is often a result of living in a manner that is contrary to the dictates of your conscience. What does that actually mean? It means that from a caregiving perspective, perhaps you are going in and doing everything like the I Am Your Caregiver poem, when really your spiritual related, caregiver related gifts are maybe only the personal care, or you're more inclined to assist with transportation and meals, but you're in a situation where you're having to do everything. And so this can create a level of distress. It says here, in fact, with spiritual distress, you're likely ignoring your call for spiritual journey. You definitely can't, and I can say this from personal experience. Really think about your spiritual journey when you're depriving yourself. You're not actually acknowledging that there is a level of discomfort with certain things. The door is open for a general feeling of meaninglessness in your life because there's a lack of choice, basically. You may have increased cynicism, distrust of others, isolation, alienation, or estrangement, and have a hopeless attitude toward the future. So we definitely don't want you to experience spiritual distress. I can think of my mother-in-law is currently being taken care of full time by my great grandmother or grandmother. So my kids' great grandma, my children's great grandmother. And part of the challenge is that mom is needing full care, and grandma is having to provide cares that maybe wouldn't be comfortable for grandma or mom, but they really don't have the choice on a day-to-day basis. And so what you see sometimes as a result is arguing about or being uncomfortable or angry with one another about surface things when what they're really angry about is the current situation. When you're spiritually cognizant, there's a consciousness that occurs, and you begin to recognize and acknowledge and then take steps towards ensuring that your personal needs as a caregiver are met. Because spiritual consciousness is a gradual process, you may be in the habit of putting your needs on the back burner. Therefore, it is important to note that your stress will likely not ease until you are empowered to access the support you need for healthy caregiving. You may be thinking, well, Ebony, I know that I'm not comfortable with doing XYZ, but I don't have anyone else that I can depend on to perform that function or that role. And that's in the case of grandma and mom. That's the case that we're currently experiencing with grandmother needing to do personal cares for mom. So sometimes it's not going to be easy to make a change in what is actually your spiritual gift and what is not, but sometimes the awareness of it can be relieving as well. When we are spiritually distressed, rescuing is the prevailing mentality. So I always talk about rescuing versus helping, and then we've added in here spiritual cooperation. So when you think about rescuing, from a nursing perspective, when I was a nurse, I could remember students going in. I used to teach home health aides and nursing assistants, and I can remember folks coming in and saying, I really want to go in and just do everything for my client because I love my client and I want to make sure that they get everything that they need. That's more of a rescuing mentality. So you're not empowered, and the person that you're caring for is not empowered. So this means that we may be placing precedence. The care of our loved one may take precedence over your emotional, physical, and spiritual needs. You may subconsciously feel that those in your care are objects to be cared for. Folks won't say, I feel like my client is an object to be cared for. What there really is an empathy there that I really want to, or a sympathy there that I really want to take care of someone. It's not sustainable. So this is why we really need to be aware and move toward helping and then cooperation. When you're spiritually cognizant, at least you're aware of and the prevailing mentality is that you acknowledge that you don't have to go it alone. This is still challenging, I think, sometimes. You know that you don't have to do everything yourself, but there's guilt there. So maybe you're not necessarily feeling comfort yet with reaching out. The process of self-awareness starts when you recognize that you have the right to spiritual boundaries, and when you are ready and willing to accept that it is necessary to act in accordance with your values. And when I'm saying values, I'm really referring to your spiritual values as a caregiver, your spiritual gifts as a caregiver. And I'm going to share a couple slides on that kind of highlight those spiritual gifts as a caregiver. When you are working in a spiritually cooperative relationship, you have a prevailing mentality that's a cooperative approach. I wish we started out in this area as caregivers, that we were using the idea that I know long-term I'm not going to be able to do this all by myself, but most of us don't. We will feel distressed, and then that's when we reach out for help. Spiritual cooperation allows you to move towards spiritual wholeness as you begin to respect and listen to what your spiritual core is telling you, and you reject practices that are in opposition to it, so that you won't feel guilt about not performing a task the way that someone else would prefer that it is performed. I'm thinking about when my daughter some time ago, she's perfectly fine now, so I'll preface it with that, but she had a brain tumor, and when we decided to have surgery for its removal, my mom came to visit, and she was talking about cleaning the cabinets and things that if you have a child that's sick, things you're just not thinking about. And I remember saying, okay, well, if that's something that you want to do, I'm perfectly fine with you going ahead and doing that. Right now, my focus is on making sure that Asia is taken care of. That was a big step for me because I really would have in the past internalized that. With spiritual distress, we also may see that we're feeling a sense of martyrdom and graceless guilt, so that you don't think of asking for assistance. And this can stem from that fact that you feel like I can manage myself, because if you aren't doing, then you feel like you're being selfish or idle, and that wouldn't be your preference. I know that sometimes for me that occurs where not with relation to caregiving, but I'm a really busy person. And when I have downtime, sometimes I don't recognize the need for the fact that I need to use this downtime to do nothing. And I will pick up an extra project because the not doing is uncomfortable. I'm learning that how important it is to enjoy that downtime. When you're spiritually cognizant, you recognize the importance of the world and your place in it, and of the meaning of life and your mission. You may continue to be hesitant and say no. You may continue to feel hesitant when you say no to the demands of your loved one or client, but you are likely empowered to accept assistance even if you feel guilty in doing so. I think this is a big thing, because there is that guilt that we have to overcome as it relates to providing care and seeking assistance and then actually accepting it. We're seeking to have an opportunity for self-actualization, so that it is possible for you to actually separate your being from doing. And over time, your burden is released. Now, I will say it is often uncomfortable to, again, not be the person that's doing. But it is important that we do have that opportunity to just be. So I'm going to share a few things that I think may be helpful in reaching spiritually cooperative relationships in general. So one thing I want you to think about is nurturing your roots. And I think this is kind of in line with, I don't know if you've seen the commercial where there's a young girl and it's a Dove chocolate commercial, and she ages each day when she gets up, and her very happy time is when she eats that one Dove chocolate, and then she looks to live her best life every day. And I think that that's very important, because we do need to have opportunities, even if it's just those small things, to nurture our roots. So I have here, I wonder whether a thorny bush and a beautiful flower each has roots. Roots are the true intentions determining plant size, shape, and color. Plants with comparable roots have the potential for similar outcomes if properly soiled, sheltered, and watered. Caring for another that is in a manner that is in line with your core is like nurturing your spiritual roots. So that's what I really want you to think about, is how do you nurture your roots? There are endless definitions to spirituality, and each of us also has our own. One that I really find that speaks to me is there's a great guide that was written by Hall and Hughes, and they define spirituality as a dynamic and intrinsic aspect of human through which persons seek ultimate meaning, purpose, and transcendence, and experience relationships to self, family, others, community, society, nature, and the significant or sacred. Spirituality is expressed through beliefs, values, traditions, and practices. I asked some caregivers over time what their definitions of spirituality, or what does spiritual wellness mean to you, and I'm going to share a couple of their responses. So one caregiver said, what it means to be spiritually well to me begins and ends with your walk with God, allowing the Creator to be Lord and King, sitting on the throne to your heart, totally surrendering to His will. Of course, we know we have our known power to our own, but to choose to submit to His will guiding. Being still enough to hear His voice. Another caregiver said, fully and completely placing your trust in our Heavenly Father, no matter what situation we face in our lives, knowing that His love for us will never fail and His will is with us. And the final definition I'd like to share is spiritual wellness is a feeling like I'm making a positive difference in someone's life every day. For me, giving someone a reason to smile every day equates to what someone call finding their higher purpose in life. So I think each of us has our own definition of what it means to be spiritually well. And I invite you, there's a booklet that I've shared. I invite you to download that booklet and review it and come up with a definition that speaks to you as to what spiritual wellness means. Each of us is entitled to being empowered by our own definition of spiritual wellness. When you look at the slide that I have here, you can see that I kind of made have a roots here, and there's a tree growing above. And our spiritually related gifts, as they relate to caregiving, can include things like meal preparation, maybe lawn management or housekeeping, emergency management, medication management, or financial management. So oftentimes what I will do is when I'm in group settings is I will have individuals take a strengths-based questionnaire that helps them identify their spiritual gifts as a caregiver. The idea is that by doing that with a group, with your family members, is that you can then begin to plan care based around who has a strength here and who is going to be most comfortable doing XYZ task. For example, grandma is very comfortable with the cooking and housekeeping. But when it comes to emergency situations or financial management, that is not one of her spiritually associated gifts. And so my husband will assist with financial management. And when there are emergency or crisis situations, then generally I take the lead. We also have other family members that participate, my sister-in-law and brother-in-law both, in helping with things like grocery shopping, coming over and sitting with my mother-in-law. And so I think it's very important if you can begin a caregiving situation like that. I will add that when it came to Gran, we did not have a systematic way to identify each family member's caregiver-related strengths because it was a crisis situation in the beginning. And then Uncle Melvin has a large family, and so of his children and wife. And so the only time that often we would get a call would be when there was a crisis situation and he was very, very stressed out and needed some assistance. And so what we're trying to do is avoid those types of situations, although we know we cannot always do that. So even with doing the spiritually related inner strengths with our family, with my mother-in-law, we still do have episodes where we need to all come together and redistribute and discuss and make sure that what we're doing is always in her best interest, but that we're also not burning one another out by depending on the other too much. So I think that this is a good, solid way to think about your spiritual gifts or your spiritual strengths as a caregiver, to identify what are things that you really feel comfortable with. As a nurse, personal cares, bathing, that type of thing doesn't bother me. But if it were, in the case of my daughter, when she was 16 and had the tumor and I had to be there to make sure she didn't fall in the shower, that type of thing, because of the relationship, sometimes, although I'm comfortably spiritually with doing a certain thing, doesn't mean that your mom or your daughter or your father, that you're going to both feel comfortable, especially when it comes to personal cares. And I don't think we always identify that that is the thing that's kind of wearing on us on the inside, that you're doing things that are, you're providing cares that are not necessarily that comfortable for you, or maybe they're comfortable for you, but it's very uncomfortable for your loved one, and how that can really be an underlying thing. So you're fighting and arguing about things that really are not the cause of your distress. The cause of your distress is that you're both having to do things that are out of your comfort zone. So we do want to reach out and collaborate with others who have complementary gifts. This is not always easy, and so if you have an opportunity to identify what your spiritual gifts are, perhaps you don't have the family structure. Maybe you are someone who lives in the community and your siblings are distance caregivers, so they can't help with the things that you would like to, the things that are not your spiritual gifts. So in that instance, sometimes it's really good to reach out and find services. And I'm sure that the Alzheimer's Foundation has great social workers that can help you identify services that may complement the things that you're doing to provide care for your loved one, so that you can, again, get to a good spiritual place. And we really do want to do this on a proactive type of approach, or terms, on proactive terms. I also have mentioned that I shared the supplement, Spiritually Cooperative Relationships. It really talks more about how you can identify services, providers, family members that are going to complement the things that you're already providing for your loved one. And so I do hope that you take the opportunity to download that and read it. The other tool I would share is actually on the Caregiver Support website. It's actually named for my mother-in-law, and it's called the Ask Emma tool. And it is a questionnaire, basically, and so you go through and answer the questions, and then it will give you whatever your strength is as a caregiver, whatever you're doing the best at for self-care for you, and then it will give you a suggestion. Emma will talk to you and tell you, these are some of the things that you may want to reach out for help with, and here are some resources to help you do that. And so at Caregiver Support Services, we really do look at empowering you to achieve optimum wellness, and spiritual wellness is a component of our Caregiver Wellness U model. And so we really strongly encourage you to continue to find ways to nurture your spirituality. So I'm going to take you on a brief mental pilgrimage. And what I've asked you to do is to close your eyes for just a moment. So close your eyes for just a moment, if you will, and imagine that you are traveling to a place of spiritual or religious significance that is tucked away in a remote region thousands of miles away. The voyage is arduous, but when you finally arrive at your destination, the scenery is more magnificent than you visualize. Your soul vibrates, and you are revitalized. You take the opportunity to acknowledge that having made it to such a divine location is a testament to your inner strength. You are refreshed. Now open your eyes. You have just taken a mental pilgrimage. So I really hope that the tips and tools that I've shared here, number one, the first thing I really suggest is identifying your spiritual related gifts that as they relate to caregiving. I also suggest that you identify individuals who may have the ability to complement the services or supports that you provide for your loved one. I also ask that you take a moment when you have a moment and ponder what it means to be spiritually well to you. It's different for each person. And then I invite you to use things like mental pilgrimages or relaxing music or a hot bath or a walk. So you identify things that you find spiritually connecting. And I think if we do one or two things at a time, I really think trying to integrate one idea into your daily or weekly routine is 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 great. You're getting a great start. That then you may start to notice that you are bit by bit feeling better, feeling more empowered, and we need that so that we can sustain over a longer period of time. So I hope that I have provided some insights and ideas that you will find helpful. And I'm going to turn it back over to Heather for questions.
Hi, thank you so much, Ebony. This was a wonderful presentation. I want to remind everybody that on the right-hand side, you could kindly type in your questions, comments, or concerns. I will read them, and Dr. Green will answer them. So if anyone has any questions, now is your time to ask. I actually have one question from Marty. He's asking, do you have any other book recommendations for spirituality and dementia caregiving, or do you know of any resources that I could suggest to my clients?
I think a great place to start for spirituality in caregiving is there's actually a really good website. My goodness. There is a really good website that is for chaplaincy and caregiving, and I find a lot of really good resources there. I need to locate that, but I will here in just a moment. I'm going to pull it up on my other computer. But yes, there is a really great organization that provides a lot of tools. The other idea that I do have is that if you go to the Emma tool and you feel like a caregiver may benefit from some additional resources for that particular caregiver, you may decide to go to that tool, and if they answer the questions and spiritual wellness is an area where they could use assistance, you will see that there are a variety of great tools there too. I wish I had that website right handy, but I'm going to pull it up and I'll share it here in just a moment.
All right, I have another question from Lauren. She's asking, how would you advise a social worker to infuse spirituality concepts with a client and or practice in a general way with not having any training?
I would say that one of the ways that I have found that's most non-intrusive is to find out what the caregiver feels is spiritually connecting them, what spiritually grounds them, and then identifying someone that they trust, that they would feel comfortable. So it may not be, if you're someone that's not trained to have a conversation with someone on their spirituality, maybe you can refer them to their whoever their spiritual leader is. And a lot more chaplains and pastors are aware of the need of caregivers and the needs that they face. The other thing I would say is just asking open-ended questions and listening, because oftentimes individuals are not really looking for you to solve the problem, especially when it's spirituality. They maybe are wanting to do more internal searching. And so open-ended questions like, what does it mean to be spiritually well, can be a good place to start. What does spiritual wellness mean to you? And then you kind of have a better idea overall of, well, what's working here and what's not working here.
All right, thank you for that great response, Ebony. I have a question comment from Victoria. This was very helpful first, thank you. My older sister was recently diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's at age 48. She has a little 6-year-old and another son who just turned 13. My question is, my religious faith has been quite weak for some time. I find the idea of the mental pilgrimage and the bath very helpful. I guess I'm a little worried that perhaps religious faith would be of greater importance in my life right now, maybe have more positive physical effects, but I just don't seem to have the faith right now. Thanks so much. However, she follows that up with, I guess my question is there evidence that secular spirituality is just as effective as religious spirituality?
I can't speak to that from a research perspective, but I do know that this past summer I had the opportunity to speak to and work with a group of chaplains and pastors, spiritual leaders from around the world. And what we talked about there was grief. And so one of the chaplains told us, we were having a discussion about how sometimes experiencing grief, so the loss of your sister's, what her life was going to be, and she's now suffering from dementia, would probably trigger a grief response. And I know that when we were talking about this, a chaplain, and she still is a chaplain, and her father was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And the suffering that he had to go through and that she watched him experience with that disease toward the end of his life, was what he ultimately passed away from, was very grievous. So sometimes I do believe that these types of situations where we're caring for a loved one and we are over time, I know it was that way with Gran, watching a steady decline until she didn't know who you were sometimes when you, there was a couple of us who she knew who we were, but most of the time she really did not know who folks were. And so it can lead to spiritual distress. And that can lead to a questioning of your faith. And then I often see that as a part of that questioning, I also see guilt, because for most of us, we're taught not to question. But, and this is just we've had a lot of loss recently in my family, and that's what Reflections from the Soul speaks about. And I know from our perspective, what I learned through the process of the many losses we've experienced as a family and through writing that book is that I personally feel that my relationship with God or my higher power is like a relationship, which means sometimes I question, sometimes I'm angry, sometimes I'm frustrated, and I'm okay with that. I think that takes time because it really does depend on what your personal definition of spirituality is. You may or may not feel comfort in that questioning. And that will sometimes lead to spiritual distress because you feel that you shouldn't question. My comfort is that I feel that questioning is part of a relationship. being angry is part of a relationship. And so I've had all of those feelings. So I hope that addresses your question. And thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah. We do have another question from Rolanda. As a caregiver program, what are the best ways to reach out to spiritual or faith-based organizations, in addition to provide services to the congregants who are caregivers?
I find that the best thing to do is to begin a relationship by reaching out to your congregations. If you have someone within your organization that already attends a particular church or organization, faith-based organization, you might begin by connecting there. What I do find is, again, most of the pastors and chaplains and spiritual leaders that I've worked with first of all, have identified caregiving as an area of need. I say that because most churches are going to have a church bulletin where, each week you're reading out who is maybe sick or shut in. And oftentimes when there's a challenge in the family or a change in the family, a loved one is going to the hospital, the pastor or outreach team will go and visit the person, the member of the church. And so there's already kind of a built-in need. And most of the time, there's actually a interest in collaboration. So more recently, I'm seeing organizations, healthcare organizations, identify the person who handles going out and doing those visits, and then seeing if they maybe could use additional training in their congregation. So you could provide a webinar, or a presentation there. But it really is about building a relationship and having the resources available so that when there's a time of need, they may not need you right now, but if you're building a relationship, when there is a need, when there is a family that could benefit from your program or support, there's an awareness there. So it's really about building that relationship.
We do have another question from Barbara. How to reach a person with dementia on a spiritual level?
How do you reach a person with dementia on a spiritual level? I think that can be challenging. I think if you really know the person, you have a greater opportunity to reach them spiritually. I think about certain clients that I've had, and then of course Gran. With Gran, we really knew what it was that was going to give her a spiritual connectedness, and that was singing. My cousin is a really great singer among a thousand other gifts that she has. Listening to music, she liked nature, so going and sitting, or being out with the flowers, or she's there while we're planting flowers. That was something that as children growing up, that Gran was always in the garden, and you always could smell the flowers and see the flowers in the springtime with Gran. So I think if you have an idea of where that person's spiritual connectedness would be, what nurtures them, then you have a greater opportunity for those things. Again, it's not always about doing when we think about spirituality. So sitting among the flowers was enough, or listening to the music, was spiritually satisfying for Gran. And you could see her face light up.
Thank you. We do have, Joan would like some suggestions. Spiritually, I want to spend as much time as possible with my loved one who is in a care facility, but I'm having some stress related to physical issues that are problematic and seem to get worse the more involved I am as a caregiver. So there is a disconnect between my spiritual desire and my body's reaction to the emotional demands of caregiving. Do you have any suggestions for Joan?
My number one thought in listening to Joan's response or question is that her body is telling her something. And so maybe it's not, I don't know if this is a possibility, because everyone experiences dementia in just a little bit different. We're still all unique, but maybe there's an opportunity for you to meet up someplace that's like your home for a couple of hours, or maybe there's a place within the facility that's not necessarily in um, your loved one's personal space. Because it just sounds to me, and I could be wrong, but it sounds to me, the way that the question was positioned, that your body is having a response. My cousin and I call it our solar plexus. It's like when your insides start turning up and down, your body is telling you that you are not comfortable with something, but then a lot of times we're taught to not listen to that. But I think maybe that there could be a different way for you to, and I don't know what that would look like, but maybe there's a different way for you to visit with your loved one, because where you're going to visit is not settled in your spirit.
Thank you. This is not a question, but Laura Mateos is giving you a compliment. She loved the presentation. She felt like it was so enlightening, and she wants to thank you for all the wonderful work that you're doing.
Oh, thank you.
I do have a question for Sarah. As a professional, I am feeling burnt out and a little bit overwhelmed. How do you suggest to professionals to tap into spiritualness for themselves?
Oh my goodness, this is so important. What I find is that before I address the question, I do want to share that most of us who are professional caregivers, meaning you may be a social worker or a nurse or an administrator, it is definitely our technical skill, but it's caregiving. But caregiving is also probably one of those things that ranks very high, caring for others, on your spiritual plane. What I find is that most of us will go to work and be caregivers at work, and then if there's a family crisis or someone needs something in the family, that we're usually that go-to person to address um, care needs, or organizing the emergencies, like I said I do for my mother-in-law. And so you're often burning the candle on both ends, and we're great at saying, take care of yourself. And this is why the U model, the caregiver wellness U model, empowering you to prevent burnout, is a primary focus that I have, because it's very easy for people to tell us to take care, or for us to tell caregivers to take care, but how do you put that into actionable steps? So I will say that it's very a natural part of our role to want to do more, and then to feel burned out and underappreciated. Um, the first thing I can say is number one, to recognize that you're burning out. Number two, to maybe sit down and figure out what it is that you would define as spiritual wellness for you. Because to me, from asking that very open-ended question and then you coming up with a definition of what that means to you, it almost just magically flows from that to what are things that are going to be that are going to make me feel empowered and that are going to help me de-stress. And for example, for me, if I think about my spiritual well-being, I'm really thinking about that oneness, but I do love stillness, although I'm still working at it. So doing things like a hot bath. In the spring, I have a pond in my front yard, so I love that the music of the water and the plants. I plant the plants. So just kind of thinking about what it is that would um, be your spiritual definition of spiritual wellness, and then kind of naturally thinking over time, I'd say maybe a week, just marinate, just think on it, and then start listing out a few things that you know that would enhance you spiritually or that you would like to do, and then pick just one of those things. And it might be saying no and shutting the door to take a hot bath, or saying no to taking on something additional. Sometimes it means that you have to hire someone to do certain things. Maybe it might be the cleaning or the yard work for you, so that you have an opportunity to decompress. So I hope that is helpful.
It was, thank you. I have a question from Donna. Her father is currently on hospice, and historically he was a very religious man in Catholicism, but currently she doesn't believe he could understand. Does it make sense for her to continue praying with him? Do you think he understands this?
I think even if he, first of all, I think that those types of things are your spiritual, what gives you spiritual strength is the last things to go. But if nothing else, think about how beautifully spiritual it is for you to sit next to your father and say a prayer or a rosary with him. That's like a very spiritually connecting experience. So whether or not there's true meaning derived from that as far as what the prayer is, I think the connectedness, we all need that. The connectedness that you're sharing with him is what's most meaningful, and it's probably, and I won't say that it is, but I would say that it's probably spiritually nurturing to you, and those are great memories too, to have, where you're sitting there next to him and being together and being one and praying. So I say yes.
Thank you. I have one last question from Susan. She's asking, is there a way to combine spirituality and humor? I'm a social worker in a setting, and I just find that I question that. Can you mix spirituality with humor?
I don't know. I think that would be a special gift if someone had a way to connect people, because it would be sensitive for some. So some depending on how it's positioned. So I will say on that one, I don't know. I think it would be a very special person that could do that.
Thank you so much. Well, Dr. Green, I certainly learned so much today, and I want to thank you for your participation. I want to thank everyone for joining us and all the questions and comments that were had. I want to let everyone know, though, that we are having a special edition Care Connection webinar on Valentine's Day, and we will be having it from 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern Time, which is February 14th, and it is a special edition. And the topic is Keeping Love Alive as Memories Fade, a Valentine's Day conversation with dementia care partners. Debbie Barr, which is a co-author of 5 books, including Keeping Love Alive as Memories Fade, will be the guest presenter. I hope everyone could join us for our special webinar on February 14th. Again, I want to thank Dr. Ebony Green for such a wonderful presentation today. And I want to thank everyone for joining us. I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of the afternoon. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.